Alright, so my next in the series of what makes this program tick is Calgary Barbell. Calgary Barbell is owned by Bryce Krawczyk, and he does have a lot of coaching and a lot of good services. So you can see that they offer here the Calgary Barbell free 16-week program, and that's great because while there are a lot of free powerlifting programs, a lot of the big names aren't offering free ones that I guess are current with their programming style or make too much sense. There are some bigger names out there where they have a generalized and intermediate program, but they came out with it 5 years ago, and they don't even necessarily follow all those training practices anymore. They also have a form check service, which seems pretty awesome if you don't get picked for that form check Friday thing, and you can even select how many lifts you want. In any case, what does the program look like? So, in terms of variation, there you go. Your comp squat, and then SSB, front squat, high bar, pin squats, pause squats. So good selections on squat variations. Bench press, 3 count bench press, 2 board, touch and go, 2 count pause. Close grip, feet up, a tricep move of your choice. So pretty good picks over there. No pin presses for bench, but whatever, fine, I guess. And then deadlifts. I put this as comp deadlift. It says sumo, but it could be whatever, right? And then pause deadlift, stiff leg deadlifts. I think in terms of because the sumo or the pull style isn't defined, those are actually 2 really good recommendations. Granted, there are better ones for a conventional or better ones for a sumo, but I think that's a really good middle ground. And the fact that GHR back extension is included here just gets my rocks off. That is a great accessory, and I love that he picked it. Pulls, there are a lot of pulls in here, which is great because I think those do transfer a lot over to bench press, even though some people shit all over that. And then there's also even more bench press variations. So close grip, incline, bench, pin press is in there. And bench with bands. There's also a lot of bird dog, side planks, rolling planks, a lot of core stability type stuff, which is actually pretty consistent with what Bryce does. So overall, I'd say good selections all around. Now this is all based off normal proportion total, so 25% bench press, 35% squat, and a 40% deadlift. Now the way this program has been filled out is I have assumed that they 100% follow the program to a T, and there was zero strength progress. Zero strength progress because that could skew the numbers, and we just want to see if you ran this program what it would look like. So what does it look like? Well, you could see that much like how Masthetics have this heavy bias towards deadlifts, Bryce Krawczyk has the same thing. Double the number of lifts for deadlifts and more than double the volume or tonnage, at least in the middle phase of the 16-week program when it comes to deadlifts. And I think that really speaks to how that is Bryce's main lift. So you do see some of that here. Now, it is kind of a hybrid program. It is some RPE, some percent-based work. I have put this into a percent-based template so you could see, and I've kind of transliterated the RPE. So if it said at 8, I knew that was going to be 93, 94% relative intensity, regardless of the percent 1RM used. So what you're going to see in terms of what you build up to is, at its worst, you're going to see 13 sets of squats, 30 sets of bench press because you are bench pressing every day and it's a 4-day program, 4-day per week program, and deadlifting up to 20 sets per week. So obviously a lot of deadlifting, a lot of bench pressing, enough squatting. You do get up to 14 sets of squats, so I think that makes sense. Deadlifts do seem kind of high, but some people could handle that. Maybe the only way you would know that you handle that is if you could handle that is if you have run a program like this. So, does it seem like it is following a trend that makes sense? So, you do see some like undulation in terms of average intensity, but on the whole, it is up and up. And you could see at least week 12, week 13, it starts undulating down. Now, this is a 16-week program. There are 3 more weeks. However, my template format cannot hold the last 3 weeks of this program. But 16 weeks, that's a 4-month program. Like, that is really extensive. That's pretty cool. Most people do like 12, but Bryce gives you 16 weeks for free. So does that make sense? Like, well, you're getting up to like at 9 efforts on week 13, so you're getting up there in intensities. You're getting up to like 85%, so that does make sense. One thing that is a little different is you can see that there's this undulation. Now, the way I think this works is that you're going to see a low amount of volume, a high amount of volume, a lower amount of volume, and then you're going to see volume really start tapering off until intensity increases. And you look at the tonnage, yeah, tonnage gets up there. Now, again, that sweet spot is like 0.8 to 1.3. 1.3? Yeah, 1.3. So long as acute chronic workload ratio is within that, then it's okay. And as long as it's above 0.5, it's okay. And you do see that. Squats, it kind of gets a little low, but again, that's the character of Bryce coming out within the program. I can't say that's a surprise there. And if you include the accessories, what do you see? Whoop! You see generally tapers down. So you could see from the total tonnage perspective, it makes a lot more sense than number of lifts or the tonnage of individual lifts. So it does make a little bit more sense there. And if you look at it, the acute chronic workload ratio totals up and within normal range. Relative intensity, number of lifts, you could see moderate amount of sets, high amount of sets, lowers, and then who knows what happens in the last 3 weeks. But at its peak, you're going to see at 9 efforts for RPE, generally speaking. Peak intensities, you are getting up to 90% of 1RM in many of the lifts, or even north of that. So, even though on the average, you're about 85%, there is a lot of really heavy lifting work in there, so you are getting normal exposure. So what does that look like? Well, you look at your squats, you could kind of see how it trends in the right direction. So it's getting where it's supposed to be on your squats. Bench presses, you're going to see a lot more heavier exposure early on, but it's mixed in. It's more complex loading. However, there are still some lighter effort works. The same thing you saw with the squat. Deadlifts, you see that same introduction of heavier lifts pretty early, 6 weeks in. You're north of 85% 6 weeks in. But you're still getting that interspersed with lighter lifts. So it kind of makes sense to me. Like, it is a different loading pattern here, but you are seeing things generally moving in the right direction. Everything looks like it is on the up and up. And it makes sense. The only way it doesn't make sense to me is the deadlift. But again, I'm not going to hold that against this program because some people do have that. And it is a high amount of deadlift sets, but it doesn't come at nearly the same sacrifice that some other programs do by favoring deadlifts way much more than the squats. I think the squats are right where they need to be at. Bench press is really high, but I think most people could get away with a lot more bench pressing than they currently do. I think the main issue with bench press is that large uptick in the number of lifts and the tonnage. However, if you look at the acute chronic workload ratio, it's still within the sweet spot, so maybe that isn't a huge concern. but it does seem like a huge transition to me. So let's just go with 3 criteria that I evaluate every program on. Is it safe? Well, I have no reason to think that it wouldn't be safe. When I've seen how everything's configured and it's distributed across 4 days, not 3, seems a lot more manageable to me. And the acute chronic workload ratios make sense. It is riding high, but it's not at the edge. So that makes sense. And it's ordered well. Is it easy to be adhered to? Now, if you look at, since this is a free program, I could show you a little bit more of what it looks like. It is a lot of percent-based work, and if you were to look at it, it does make sense. Some of it is essentially practice reps, like all these ones that are blank here. 70% for 3 reps, like that's pretty easy. However, I'm not sure if these are percentages of the parent lift, the vanilla lift, or if it's for that particular lift. But it does make a lot of sense to me. There isn't necessarily an explanation on RPE, but I feel like if you were to go from Bryce, if you knew Bryce Krawcheck, you were probably already knew about RPE. That and there isn't an overbearing amount of RPE work. Most of it is percent-based, so that does simplify a lot of it for you. So I don't think that's a huge concern. I think in terms of adherence, the biggest obstacle would be the high volumes at deadlifts, but I think they're low enough that they're manageable, especially for a 4-day program, so it gets upwards to 18. So I think it's 2 or 3 deadlift sessions per week. So probably about like 5-7 sets of deadlifts per session. That's not too unmanageable in my opinion. You are going to do a lot of bench pressing, but the way that it's distributed kind of makes sense. So, and then the last one is outcome. Does it seem like it's trying to do what it says it's trying to do? Yeah, it does. It does. You look at all this, like everything looks like it's trending in the right direction. So I think it does have that going for it. And I think there's a lot of variation, but I think with how frequent or how the amount of workload you're working with, you would probably want more variation to begin with. So that's probably right where it ought to be. Am I saying, have I run the program? No, I haven't run the program, but I've run programs somewhat similar to this. Not nearly as much deadlift volume. And I've heard plenty of success stories on Reddit of people who made great success with this. So, would I recommend it? Yeah, generally I would recommend it. I mean, the guy's he's a veteran of powerlifting. He's got experience as a coach. He owns a gym. He's goes to IPF Worlds on the reg. So yeah, I'd recommend it. It looks overall pretty well. I'd stick with it. So there you go. That is the Calgary Barbell 16-week intermediate program.